So the Steam Next Fest for October 2025 just finished, and I was going through the list of all of the top 50 demos basically and the studios behind them, because I kind of was curious about something and my suspicions were confirmed, where basically not a single game that was in the top 50 performing demos was from new studios, or like from beginner studios, I think is a better word, because you see like, okay, this is for certain studios definitely like the first game they published, but it's not the first game that they've like ever made, if that makes sense. You know, it's a studio built up from people who have shipped games before. Same thing even with like smaller studios, the true indies, which is like just 1 or 2 people, they have shipped games before. And this made me kind of think about, you know, the requirements and how it takes time to make good games, and how sometimes, especially on the internet, kind of everything is like, oh, make a game that makes $1 million in 3 months, or like we keep compressing time. You know, it goes from like, oh, making a game in 1 month to making a game in 1 week to making a game in 48 hours to making a game in 24 hours. We always want success faster. But there is kind of the problem, where we have the other side of the spectrum, which is like on the r/game dev subreddit, where you see these posts of like, I just released my first game even though it only had 150 wishlists, and then you look at the game and it's just garbage. And then you have like all of these people in the comments that's like almost toxic positivity of like, yes, you go, at least you finished something, that's the most important thing. And I have to be honest, I will never applaud you for simply shipping a game on Steam. That's just not what I am. But on the other hand, I also don't require you or like expect you as the Byte reviewer to be in the top 50 of best performing developers. I think, you know, the bar for game development is so incredibly low. Like, you can ship anything if you just spend $100. You do not need any skill, I'm gonna be honest with that, to release a game on Steam. I think it becomes harder when you actually want to make quality games, of course, and that is where I will applaud you for not just shipping something, but shipping something meaningful and something interesting. And that's kind of the core that I want to talk about in this video. How do you get to that point? How do you get to that point of potentially 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, being a developer that can shine in those top 50 demos of the Steam Next Fest? Because it is something where we have that problem of, okay, yeah, Marnix, you say that you don't get anything for releasing a game and like you're not proud of us on that, but how do I then get better? Because you cannot expect the first game that you release to be a good game, to be a banger 10 out of 10 game. That is just, unfortunately, like, you know, you always have people who get lucky, but you shouldn't go in with luck as your entire plan of how you're going to run your game studio. It's going to take time. Your first few games, I always say this, are going to maybe not be even entirely shitty, but they are going to have clear flaws, which is normal. And that's why I always say your first few games, honestly, they shouldn't even go onto Steam, in my opinion. They should go onto other platforms, like in Israel, for example, where you leave out everything about marketing and joining festivals and gathering wishlists and all of that, and you should just focus on first making a game that actually is good and fun and playable. That's something that you already see a lot of game developers, especially with those first few games, completely struggle on. I torture myself by looking sometimes at like all of the upcoming games that are going to come out on like a specific day, not just the popular ones, but also the shitty ones that launch with no menu, no settings, no nothing, just like one single level. You start the game up and you're immediately in the game. Things that I would not consider normal, and especially not good enough for platforms like Steam, where they then suddenly charge like $5 for it. It's just not worth it. Instead, these first few games that you're making, they kind of teach you more about the process of making games and not really about how to make profitable games. I think that's a big one, where you're just going to iterate on making better games. And I think there is some positive news in here, even though you may be like, oh, but I don't want to spend 3 years making 6 different games before I can get success. Sure, that's maybe not your favorite thing, but it also shows that luck, in my opinion, doesn't take as much of a percentage of the entire calculation of how successful your game's gonna be. You will learn to make good games. You don't have to be lucky to come into good games. There is this analogy I heard once from another developer about like, you know, releasing games on Steam is just like pulling a slot machine. And I think that is just inherently wrong if you boil down game development to only that. Sure, you will always have some level of the slot machineness on your game, but I think it's not like you're going to be making 5 of the same games, you're going to upload all 5 of them on Steam like 1 month spaced apart from each other, and 1 out of 5 is going to be a success. That's also not how game development works. It is something that you get better at, and I think it's almost kind of a thing that you see where once you've had a few games that are like decently successful, it gets a lot harder to fail as well. And the problem lies in bridging that gap between, you know, losing out on that first few months of like hype because you just got into indie game development and you love it, but then you need to last long enough to get to the point where you've gotten good enough at the processes and the entire field of game development to actually start thinking more about the profit. This is where a lot of starting game studios fail as well, where they only have runway for, let's say, 1 year, and it takes them 9 months to ship their first game. They will never reach that second game, and it's an unfortunate thing because the first few games they make will always be the worst performing games that they will ever make. I'm 100% convinced by this. It will only go uphill in terms of game development, but a lot of developers will simply not last long enough to reach to that point where the uphill is positive enough for them that they can keep making more and more games. I see this also with our audience. Believe it or not, we do have successful game developers in the Bite Me Games audience. I know, I'm just as surprised as you are, where, you know, once you've gotten like a game to like 50k or 100k in total revenue once, it becomes hard to then kind of lose at game development, because even if you have a worse performing game, you still have a lot of doors, for example, that have opened because you were hot shit for a while with your previous game, for example. You have a decent stream of passive income from the previous games that will keep selling when you put it on discount, when there's seasonal sales and all of that. And that is kind of the thing where reaching this point takes years. I still believe that we are a few months out from reaching that point ourselves. I believe that in 6 to 9 months, we are going to reach that point as well, where we almost become quote unquote too big to fail, but not in like the bad sense, but more in terms of where we've been able to put in so many reps at this point and been trying so much over the past 3.5 years at this point in game development that we have simply gotten a lot better at it. Even though maybe on a day-to-day scale, it doesn't look like we're doing things very differently, or it doesn't look like you're improving a lot. When you zoom out and you look at that bigger picture over a longer period of time, where you can see noticeable improvement. I think even more, maybe you don't even want your first games to be massive successes. I know this may seem weird, but hear me out. If you have your first game, and let's say you do get lucky, and you kind of unfairly, I know this sounds weird, but I still think you deserve the success you get, but it may seem unfair of like, oh, you made a game and you somehow stumbled yourself in with like a lucky press release or whatever into selling like $50,000 worth of that game. You're going to kind of run into a wall for that next game where you almost guaranteed will not be able to reproduce that same success because you didn't have a good process yet that takes time to develop, basically, of like, how do I make games? How do I market my games? How do I make sure that I have good games? And instead you start feeling like it just has to be hit driven. Like there is no logic in it. Like it's just like, oh, I just have to get lucky once again. And this is honestly more demotivating because you're going to get this paralysis where you put that second store page up, for example, and you get no wish lists anymore because you didn't have the process to make somewhat repeatable, decent, or even good games. I'm not even talking about perfect games, just decent ones, because these are still your first few games that you're making. And because of that, you're going to get basically no wish lists, which would have been the normal flow if you didn't get lucky that first time. But now suddenly you're going from such a good height, especially as your first game, to then that second game being kind of the reset moment where you may once again throw in the towel and never keep going through developing your own process and keep iterating and keep releasing and improving upon game development to get back up to that point of, okay, I can now call myself a successful game developer. And this is where hobbyist game developers are also so powerful. When you are working on those first few games, you should not be quitting your job to become a full-time game developer, most likely. You should be approaching it with more of a calm approach, taking your time, making hobby projects. Don't even worry about putting them on Steam immediately, building up those first few small games to build up the process for yourself. You will notice there are a lot of things that you do not know right now. There are these things that I also can't explain myself, but I think I have a decent feeling, not like a great one. I'm not like a professional scout or something for like a publisher, but I'm getting a better feeling for when is a game good enough, when does a game potentially have the juice, the magic power that could make it really go well, versus when should something just kind of be left behind. I cannot explain it. When I talk to other people, they cannot explain it. It's just a gut feeling that you get, and you'll be better than the average person after a while of having done enough iterations, of having done enough pitfalls that your subconscious will understand what's good and bad about games, even though you yourself can't immediately put it into words. And if you're only consuming content of like, oh, here's how I made this game in 1 month and made $1 billion, then you will not be able to develop that feeling for yourself. And even if you try to then one by one replicate, for example, what we did with Kyoto Anomaly, a game that we made after 3 years of development and already having released a similar game before, where we understood the genre a bit more, and then you're like, hey, these guys made Kyoto Anomaly in a month. I'm also going to make an Anomaly horror game as my first game. And then kind of feel like, oh, I'm pretty sure my game is better than their guys, but it didn't sell nearly as much. It's not just about luck. It's also about you not feeling all of those small little details and tweaks and quality of life things that we have built up over time. I think this channel, at the end of the day, is a great example of anyone can do it. You just need to be boneheaded enough to keep doing it. We have never deleted a single video on this YouTube channel. You can go and sort by oldest, and you can see videos of me, I think 4 years ago at this point almost, talking about game development, how we're getting started, what we thought back then, what we considered were good games, for example. I think a great example here as well is Songs of Everjade. This was the second game we ever worked on, and we ended up canceling it because it had a miserable Nextfest performance. We didn't understand back then. We didn't have that feeling for ourselves of what is a good enough game. So we thought that we were making an awesome, amazing new game, but we didn't have the overall knowledge yet to realize that actually this is just like us as the developers being in love with our own game and not understanding the flaws, because we hadn't built up that more like analytical mindset, if you want to call it that, of figuring out what makes a good game. For you guys, maybe looking at the gameplay footage on screen of that game right now, you're like, of course this game failed. But that is the benefit of being a third-party observer. You are going to fall into that exact same trap as we did with Songs of Everjade. And it's once again part of your development process. It's not sexy to say, oh, it's going to take at least 2 years before you're going to probably have a chance at anything remotely successful that you could be worth considering quitting your job for, because you have enough passive income and all of that, and all of the game releases in between that, or getting a publisher. But I think it's way worse to kind of believe that you can make a commercially viable Steam game in like 3 months as your first game. So I guess the point of this video is just to be like, hey, it takes time. And the only way you're going to get better at game development at the end of the day is by making more games. Sure, watching every single Bite Me Games video and every single, I don't know, other game development YouTubers video will maybe add a little bit in terms of game development, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't watch other game development YouTubers. I genuinely don't. If I do watch them, I watch them more from like, you know, quickly skim through of like what are they uploading, what's performing well and what's not performing well, because of like, you know, it's my job as well as a game dev YouTuber to understand it. But I don't really watch anything of like, here's tutorials on level design or here's all of that. I just throw shit at the wall. I keep iterating, I keep making games. And that is how I kind of improve. I talk to other people about what are they doing for games. I look at what other people are doing, but I'm not just eternally watching videos about how to be an amazing game designer or whatever, and then assuming that the first game I'm gonna be making after I've consumed 500 hours of game development content is immediately going to be amazing. Maybe game development YouTube and all of those things will still help you a little bit, but at the end of the day, it pales in comparison to just making more games and especially sticking with it for long enough. If you have a long enough time horizon, you can make anything successful. The problem, and this is honestly something I can't even blame you, is that most people do not want to spend 5 years on this without potentially seeing any meaningful results out of it, which is unfortunately part of game development as well. So I just want to say, keep it easy, keep going, slow and steady wins a race. I think once again, like I said, our channel is a pretty good example of that, because you can just see our evolution over time and realize that getting good takes years. It takes a long time. It takes thousands of hours, and there are no real quick shortcuts to get better at game development. You know, you can make games faster with like all of the engines and all of the tools and all of that, but game design, level design, all of these things, they just need you to put in the hours at the end of the day as well. And you don't need to beat yourself up when you look at people like me on the internet talking about how much money they made from their games, and then you're sitting there like, but where is my money? It's normal. takes time. Just keep going at it, just like we'll keep going at it, because at some point I know we will make it, as long as we just keep making games and consciously trying to make better games each time. So I hope this was kind of an interesting video. I just wanted to talk about this because in today's society, it feels very much like everything is a challenge and it's all of those game development challenges and whatever. I don't really like that. I think they give a pretty negative view of game development to new game developers because you're missing so much context of who are these developers and what are they actually capable of. So I kind of just wanted to make a little bit of a more grounded video. If you're new here, we're game developers, we make games ourselves, and we also make videos about the things we learn and the process of making those games on this YouTube channel. So if that's something that you're interested in, then be sure to head down below and subscribe because it's a win-win for both of us. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!